Yes.
Okay. Okay, great.
Okay, aloha. 皆さん、こんにちは。ハワイ州最高裁判事のサブリナ・マッケナと申します。Hello, everyone. My name is Sabrina Mckenna, Associate Justice of the Hawaii Supreme Court. And, I have a prepared PowerPoint. I'm going to stray a little bit from it because some of the things that I was going to say was just so wonderfully covered by Chief Justice Mark Rechtenwald, who is a wonderful leader on access to justice as well as language access issues, and I'm so privileged to be able to work with him. So this morning we talked a little about stories, so I just wanted to mention my story just off the top of my head. I was born and raised in Japan. My dad died when I was 9, and so my mother was Japanese. We grew up in a U.S. military environment. So from the age of 9, I became her English-Japanese interpreter and translator. And when my mother went to typing and shorthand classes to try to improve her skills so that she could work for the U.S. government, I was her interpreter and translator. And when she went to the U.S. military doctors, and then when she moved to Hawaii in 1991 and battled her cancer until she passed away in 1997, I was her interpreter and translator. So the stories this morning really, really hit home for me, and I really, the politics is personal. And so this issue is personal for me. So thank you, all of you, for being here. So I was going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we face, which include, we have so many different islands and different language needs depending on the islands. It's a cute little picture of our Kauai, in front of our Kauai courtroom. But so we've already heard this, 1 in 4 residents of our state speak a language other than English at home. Half of those people are of limited English proficiency. Nearly 1 in 5 of us are immigrants. And 51% of immigrants speak English less than very well. So this morning, I'm just going to digress a little bit. There was some discussion about can we have the interpreter of our choice, or can we ask for another interpreter? It seems to me that the issue, whether under the federal laws or under our state law, is the standard is meaningful access. And so what does that mean? If the interpreter cannot do his or her job, then the access that you are getting is probably not meaningful. So we already have this, 1 in 8 residents, and more than 130 languages are spoken in Hawaii. So in terms of the judiciary, what is our goal? It's to facilitate access to justice for LEP persons. And so how do we try to fulfill this need? Without adequate language access services, parties, witnesses, court users are not able to meaningfully participate in court cases or understand what the court is saying. So what have we done? And I didn't include slides on this, but let me just say that at least as of 1973, our case law clearly recognized the practice in our courts, which was to provide free interpreters for criminal defendants in criminal cases. And in 1978, the United States Congress passed the Court Interpreters Act, requiring federal courts to provide free interpreters for criminal defendants, as well as in civil cases when the United States government was the plaintiff, but not in all civil cases. And then the federal courts did start a certification program, but I believe it's very few languages: Spanish, Creole, I'm sorry, I'm not, very Navajo, very few languages. So what has the state judiciary done in terms of I know we're moving forward, but I do want to talk a little bit more about our history because, we didn't get to #1 in the country in a vacuum. It didn't happen overnight. And so I'd like to talk about some of the things that I think have been happening. In 1992, the current Office on Equality and Access to the Courts was formed. And it was actually originally it was formed in response to a study of the Judicial Conference on women's issues. And it was a gender fairness issue. But then the Office on Equality and Access to the Courts was formed to eliminate barriers and to increase access for court users. In 1995, the Supreme Court Committee on Court Interpreters was formed with Judge Melvin Soong as the first chair. And you might know that his son, Judge Michael Soong, has just been appointed a district court judge in Kauai and will soon be sworn in. But anyway, Judge Soong was our first chair. That same year, Chief Justice Ronald Moon issued a policies on court-interpreted proceedings in the courts of the state of Hawaii. And the policies basically required judges to try to ascertain if they had an LEP person in front of them, and if so, to go ahead and appoint an interpreter. But the policies were somewhat vague as to which proceedings they covered. And in practice, the courts were still only providing free court interpreters for criminal defendants in criminal cases. But also, with the passage of the Violence Against Women's Act and the real increase in the restraining order process, a policy was implemented to provide, and it was actually through the prosecutor's office, a cooperation with the prosecutor's office, that interpreters were provided for petitioners in domestic violence restraining orders. And also we started appointing interpreters for respondents in domestic violence restraining orders, because otherwise, how could a violation of such a restraining order be enforced if you couldn't establish that the respondent actually understood the restraining order? But still, it was still in limited areas. And around this time, the first director of our Office on Equality and Access to the Courts, Du Kaneshiro, led efforts of the OEAC of a dissemination of legal information in English and other languages, and we created videos and small claims and traffic proceedings in English, Ilocano, and Korean. And we created a multilingual law line on telephone where we had recordings in 7 languages. And we also created a bilingual attorney directory for people that maybe need attorneys that could speak another language. So as I indicated, the court interpreter program was established. The committee was established in the 1990s. I started serving on that committee on 1996. I know I see people here that I think were on that committee even from before me. Suzanne, Alohalani Boydo was on it. Who else might have been on it originally? But we had wonderful people that helped us develop some of these programs. And one of the first things we did was, we did not have an interpreter certification program yet. We at least wanted to ascertain whether the interpreters that we had on our registry actually could understand English at least, to make sure, because I have to tell you, I had some terrible experiences where I remember I was taking a change of plea in Ilocano, and professional interpreters like Alohalani and Sue will, from the time that the case is called, they'll start interpreting so that the defendant knows that their case is being called. Well, that wasn't happening. But in addition, when I started explaining to the defendant, nothing was being said. And so I said, Mr. Interpreter, please interpret everything that I'm saying. And it wasn't happening. So I had to postpone it. I had to get another interpreter because obviously this interpreter was not qualified. And so we decided we at least needed to make sure that we start doing something. And so we started a program where we had interpreters at least submit an application in English and take an optional court interpreter ethics exam. We would teach them ethics. We had an ethical code attached to our policies to see if they had understood that at least. Resigned from our office, and then Debbie Tulong de Silva took her place, I believe in about 2005. And the mandate that we gave her was, please start a court interpreter certification program. And with the assistance of the Committee on Court Interpreter Certification, with the guidance and with the help from the National Center for State Courts, within 2 years, Debbie and her office, and I just want to mention Phil Liu, that was with us because he worked so hard on the program. Unfortunately, he had an aneurysm and couldn't work anymore. But they really were people that helped get that program going. And then since then, it's been Melody and Uwe. We have wonderful staff. And of course, I just want to recognize everybody, all the interpreters, and all of the people that have served on our Committee on Equality and Access to the Courts, as well as our Committee on Court Interpreters, for all of the long hours that you put in creating the program, creating the guidelines, creating the court interpreter payment guidelines, creating the form that we use for court interpreters. Okay, so in order to interpret in court, court interpreters must submit an application, attend a 2-day basic orientation workshop, pass an written English and basic ethics exam, clear a criminal background check, and then we have oral tests, as you probably know. And our policy is to provide the most qualified, reasonably available interpreter for each court assignment. Our 15 top languages that are used in that $640,000 in interpreted proceedings are as follows. Our number 1 is Chuukese, our number 15 is Kosrayan, as you can see on that list. I have limited time. Unfortunately, we have a limited pool of interpreters, especially in the Pacific Island languages. As the Chief Justice said, there was 10,592 interpreted proceedings in fiscal year 2015. We now have 11 certified interpreters, 8 Spanish, 1 Ilocano, 1 Mandarin, and 1 Laotian. Of those 10,500 proceedings, 3,258 were Chuukese. We have 9 Chuukese interpreters on the islands. Next was Korean, 925. So we still, the CJ mentioned what has happened, the cooperation we had with the DOJ. We embraced it as an opportunity to improve our program. So we developed a very clear language. Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay, so a policy of, and that is our policy, as you can see. I just can't say enough about Chief Justice Rechtenwald and his leadership. When I took over as Senior Judge of Family Court in 2009, we still didn't have free interpreters on all case types. In family court, I unilaterally imposed a policy of requiring free interpreters on all case types in family court. Just to mention, in 2002, Justice Akoba wrote an opinion called In Re Do, saying that in parental rights cases, if there's a substantial burden on parental rights, the judiciary must provide free interpreters. And so that was an expansion. But we still weren't providing free interpreters in all family court cases. So in 2009, we started doing so. And then when Chief Justice Rechtenwald came on board, he immediately enforced that, expanded that to the entire judiciary effective 2012. So that was a wonderful thing that you did. Thank you. So we do provide free interpreters live in person for criminal defendants in criminal cases, depending on the need. Over the counter, we have all the staff is trained on telephonic interpreters. We have a bilingual employees guide. Sometimes I'm on the Japanese list. Sometimes I take calls from people that, you know, I took a call from someone in Japan that had a question for the judiciary. So we have bilingual employees that will respond. And we do whatever we need to try to get the word out that we provide free services. And let me just show you the language access cards. We have samples out there. Take a bunch. Check out our website. We have a language access tab. I'm sorry, I should have made a copy of it, but we have an entire language access tab. It's right on our judiciary. It's the right-hand tab. It has lists of interpreters. It has all of our language access codes, how to request an interpreter in all these different languages. We still have some work to do, especially in some of the languages that we... Did I turn it off? Okay, well, I know how to project, so I used to be a trial judge, and I used to, you know, have to project my voice to all the jurors, and so so we still have work to do, especially in from some of our programs. We started providing interpreters and drivers education, those classes that you need to take, but sometimes we're still working on the issues of like, let's say probation requires certain types of counseling and things like that as a condition of probation. It can get quite expensive, but as has been said, it's the right thing to do. So whatever we have on our website, however our experience might be able to help you, please feel free to call on us. The judiciary is happy to help. Use our list of interpreters, their phone numbers by language, their certification levels are right on our website. They have authorized us to publicize their names to other organizations that might need interpreters. And please use our cards, go ahead and adapt them. And please call Melody and Debbie and Uwe with any questions that you may have. Mahalo. Thank you so much, everyone, for your commitment.
Thank you, Justice Mckenna. I was just going back to this slide, which I think will be really interesting to our audience as to the most encountered languages in our judiciary, which may or may not reflect what other agencies experience, but I think this will give you a sense of what the experience is at the judiciary. So, okay, thank you. And then, so we'll move on to hear about our Department of Labor. Okay, Aj, thank you.
Aloha, I'm Khandaker, the EO Compliance Officer at the Department of Labor. I found out I was speaking last night, so I don't have any slides prepared. So I've been asked to speak about what's been happening with language access at DLIR over the past few years. I actually started at DLIR in June, so I'm mindful that I guess audience members who actually implemented these improvements in the audience, you know, might know more about this than I do. So thank you to all those people. So in June of 2013, the Federal Department of Labor's Civil Rights Center found that DLIR was not in compliance with the non-discrimination provisions of the Workforce Innovation Act, which is now the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. For example, the Unemployment Insurance Division's website was only available in English, so if you were trying to apply for unemployment benefits and you didn't speak English, you're out of luck. So in April 2014, the DLIR entered into a conciliation agreement with the Federal Department of Labor to sort of work on some of our issues, and so with the Office of Language Access and other people, thank you. So DLIR has, I guess, implemented sort of a number of improvements. So for foremost, the UI website is now updated, so you can apply for unemployment benefits even if English is your primary language, and you're also made aware that you can have free interpretation available to you in, I guess, 9 different languages. DLIR now keeps an updated list of volunteer interpreters in other languages, so if you come to DLIR and you need help in interpretation for ministerial services, then you can find a volunteer interpreter pretty easily. If like benefits or rights are at stake, then of course we'll get like a certified interpreter. So we've formalized the training and the review requirements for all of our employees. So before it was sort of ad hoc, but now it's, you actually, like, there's no point in having a policy unless people actually know what it is, have done the training and review it every year and follow it. So we've gotten better at that. I think vital documents have now been translated into other languages, I believe, with Suzanne. Maybe not. Someone helped us translate a bunch of vital documents. So we've distributed magnets with telephonic interpretation, so people can obtain that when they need it. Of course, the posters have been distributed, so people can point to them when they need help in interpretation for that language. Our mailings now include information on how to obtain free interpretation when needed. And of course, our LEP reporting and encounter information has improved significantly. So the conciliation agreement actually ended in January of this year, and hopefully we'll keep getting better at improving access, both so that the feds don't come down on us again, and more importantly, so that we can be inclusive and accessible with our services, which is the whole point. Thank you.
Thank you, Aj. The Office of Language Access, even though we're currently attached to the Department of Health, and our purview is every state agency and covered entity, but we're actually physically located right next to the director's office of DLIR. And I'll have to say, just over the last couple of years, I've noticed marked improvements on Labor's language access efforts. There's posters everywhere. I walk down the halls and there'll be staff people knowing that I'm with the Language Access Office and they're asking questions. And I know Debbie Tulang Silva, who's unfortunately not here with us today, but she had done the training at DLIR, and I really do think that Department of Labor represents a Cinderella story, coming from a complaint to the feds, and now their conciliation agreement is closed, and they are a model that other agencies can look to. So thank you, Aj. So we're going to move to DHS, Department of Human Services, and this agency was also the subject of a complaint that went to a federal agency. Michael Leos is representing that agency, and another Cinderella story, maybe I'd say. And so we'll listen to Bridget talk about DHS. Thank you.
Well, aloha, everyone. So similarly, I'm also new. Is it on? Okay. I'm also quite new to the Department of Human Services, so I was appointed as the deputy on September 1st, and I was actually really happy that this is one of the first things, the first issues that I've had to focus on language access because of this event, because it's an issue that has been in past work near and dear to my heart. I did work as a prosecutor a long time ago, and so I had opportunities to work with the folks that that provide the interpretation services, and they were really vital to the work that we were trying to do, and made everyone's job, regardless of which side of a case you're on, so much easier. And so the developments that Justice Mckenna was talking about in the courts are just really so important, as well as the labor developments. I just want to recognize my colleague here, AP Bumrangran, who is, many of you probably know. So he's in charge of the Department of, he's right here at this table. You want to just say hi? Yeah. So he's in charge of our language, or limited English proficiency program. And again, if there may be many of you who know more about what we do than even I do, as I'm relatively new. But I was asked today to talk about some of the challenges that DHS has had challenges, efforts, and accomplishments that we've had over the last few years. And so our LEP program, which AP runs, was established in 2013. And since then, the department has really, I think, just moved forward so significantly in the kinds of services that we can provide to the clients that we serve. It's a department of one person right now, and he does an awful lot. But the benefit of this work is that the work is centralized, so that all of the LEP needs throughout our department are serviced through the director's office. So this position works very closely with the small group of people that work in the director's office, reports directly to the director, so it's a very high profile and very important position for the entire department and the thousands of employees that work for DHS. Some of the challenges that we've had over the years, I guess the primary one is just the number of languages that are here in Hawaii. So it's obviously a very diverse community. You saw the list that was up there. For us, we had in DHS, just in the first 6 months of 2016, we had more than 1,500 encounters, LEP encounters. And I believe our primary encounter languages were Cantonese and Korean, but I'm told that can really vary, and I have a list here of almost 20 different languages that our staff encountered in the first half of 2016. And so this is a challenge for a number of reasons. Obviously, when you have that many different types of languages that are being spoken, it's hard to find people in the community that are able to provide those services, especially on short notice. And I mean, even a geographic area as small as, say, Chuk has multiple dialects that are spoken. So it's very hard often to find the specific language, the specific dialect that the client needs at that moment. And then we also have linguistic challenges in terms of what the specific meanings of words. And I was thinking of this when we were doing Tarina's exercise earlier, because one example that we've had is when we were developing our website, one of the buttons to click on was back to home, right? Return to the home page. And for the folks that we're serving at DHS, that can have some really, even frightening meanings about having to return back to where you came from. So, a really small and subtle, just 3 words on the website can make a significant difference in whether a client chooses to access our services. So those are some of the linguistic issues we've been dealing with. As to cultural issues, again, each community comes in with its own, its own cultures, its own traditions, and there are issues associated with, for example, some cultures are more embarrassed about, reaching out for services and feel ashamed that they have to reach out or don't want to be a burden on this new community that they've come into. So that can be a barrier. And there may be cultural issues relating to gender or age and how comfortable people feel when they come into the office and they're talking to someone who not only speaks a different language, but also is of a different gender or different age group. And that might affect not only their ability to communicate, but even the decision to whether to move forward and try and access the services that they're entitled to. Similar to the courts, sort of trying to emulate what the courts are doing, we don't have a certification program the courts have their certification program, but one of the challenges that we have is sort of that issue of standards and qualifications. So this is something that we're moving toward. AP has been working on that with a number of community partners probably that are here in the room to see how we can develop a certification program to make sure that the clients that we serve are getting the right level of appropriate and accurate interpretation services that they need. And then generally we also have limited resources. Again, it's a small community, and so limited numbers of people may speak a language and they may know each other, and so that is another barrier, that folks don't want to come in and have very personal, troubling issues interpreted for them by folks that live in their same, down the street, right, and really are maybe their neighbors. It's not appropriate, and it prevents folks often from moving forward with getting their services. And then also procurement issues. Being a state agency, we have to follow the procurement rules. And one of, just as an example, one of the vendors that we work with to provide language access services, or I guess in the past there have been several instances where folks were on the mainland to provide telephonic or other services, and they just didn't want to go through the very specific procurement rules that we require them to follow. So that kind of further limits the pool of interpretation services that we're able to access. So those are some of the challenges that we face. But we also were asked to talk about our efforts to ensure that our LEP services and the program are sustainable. So we've been working really hard on staff training. So the folks who are at the desks and the counters or on the phone where our clients come in, it's not about training them in speaking all these different languages. Of course, that would be impossible, but it's very important for them to be able to identify when it's important to call in someone to provide the services. You know, if a person is struggling or, asking different questions that might sort of trigger a need to look further into whether they actually need some professional help or we need to bring in professional help in really understanding and communicating with them better. So that is an ongoing process. It's about creating awareness for our staff and really making an effort to avoid any kinds of discriminatory practices. And we're working on improving our system to gather data and manage data and apply data to inform our program development. So just as an example, the numbers of encounters with our clients of the different types of languages, what services are they accessing. That's the kind of data that we're trying to track better. And we're in the middle of a major IT upgrade. It's kind of department-wide, but a very important component of that we're working on is going to be related to making sure that the services are delivered in all of the languages that folks use here in Hawaii. Again, the testing and certification program, something that we're working on with OLA, I guess Department of Health, and the city are also involved, as well as UH. And then, of course, the judiciary. So that's a work in progress. We consult with stakeholders, and this is, as I say, AP is really the lead on this, but I know that he meets frequently with various committees, including, the OLA folks, Interagency Council for Immigrant and Refugee Services, and I believe that's facilitated by Susanna Wellesley organization. There are federal services, and there's a list of many groups that we meet with. So we're really trying to get input from all of these different groups as to how we can improve our services. And then we have internal staff meetings as well, and these are considered sort of like a working focus group internally. The people that are at the counters or answering the phone get together regularly to talk about the issues that they've faced and, again, share throughout our division, our various divisions to see how different divisions are handling their issues, and hopefully we can learn from that together and improve the services across the department. And then finally, some of the achievements that we've been asked to talk about today. One of them, as I say, is establishing this limited English proficiency program within the director's office. So it's right there every day. All of us see AP when we walk in the door, and he's right there embedded in the director's office. So we're very mindful of that, and it's very front and center for the director, for Pankaj Banot, our new director. And so that is, it's really an accomplishment and a difference over the last 3 or 4 years from how things were handled in the past. So that centralization, that real focus on LEP issues is something that we're quite proud of. Still a lot of room for improvement, but working very hard to get there. We currently provide 2 types of language access services, so oral translation and written, and to sort of divide that up, we work with a telephonic interpretation service based on the mainland. So if someone comes up to a counter and needs a particular language, usually we can get an interpreter on the phone within 1 minute. I don't know how they do it. It seems miraculous to me, but somewhere on the mainland there's a network of interpreters that are ready to provide those services, and I'm sure many of you folks probably use that service as well. And then for more complex encounters where we need someone in person, we'll generally have to make an appointment, have the client come back so we can really line up someone who can provide the appropriate interpretation services. We have community partners that we work with, including Pacific Gateway, I believe Helping Hands, Language Access Hawaii, Language Services Hawaii, excuse me, provide the services for our clients for more complex types of encounters like meetings or hearings. And then, of course, we provide written translation of various documents when the need is there. So recently we had, for example, a hearing notice, an administrative hearing notice that had to be translated into Chuukese. And it's challenging. It's challenging to find someone who can do that, and it's expensive as well. I'm told it was about 40 cents a word, and when you look at a relatively long document, then the price can go up. But it's definitely a service that we provide, and we've translated many of our forms, the most commonly used ones. Applications for the most commonly requested services into various languages, the most commonly used languages in Hawaii, and those are available, some online or some in the office. And then just to make sure that folks, when they first walk in the door, they don't know what's available to them. It can be a very daunting experience to walk through the door for the first time to seek government help. And the services that we provide. So we want to make sure that folks know that the services are available to them. So we have, posters, we have these multi-language, I need an interpreter types of publications that we put up all around the offices so that folks can come in and point. If they're able to read, they can point to the kind of service they need, and that's also a help for our staff to make sure we're making the right connections. And I've just been asked to say that although we really, are very proud of the work that we've done over the last 3 or 4 years, we feel like we've really come a long way under the leadership of the previous directors that we've had over the last several years. We recognize that there's room for improvement, and so we really welcome any suggestions that that any of you folks here in the room might have, whether you're an interpreter or whether you're a service provider. If you hear from our clients that something hasn't gone quite right, we really genuinely encourage you to let us know. Our clients, understandably, are often hesitant to tell us that they're not happy with the services that they're providing as to language access. It can be intimidating for them. So we really do rely a lot on our stakeholder, fellow community partners to let us know if there's anything that we can improve on. And the person to contact about that is AP. But we wanted to thank you for letting us share a little bit of what we're doing at DHS. So thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Again, DHS represents a very important array of services that we all need, not just the LEP public, but all of us. And we're grateful for the efforts and accomplishments that all the departments have provided in language access. And I just wanted to also note, these guys represent some of the best efforts in the state, and it may, in a large degree, have to do with the Fed's watchful eye. But I'll just send out this little warning flare for all the other agencies, covered entities, and whatnot that may not have had the Feds looking at them, but they're there, and it could be you someday, and you may be up here talking about how your department's now doing really well, but there was some pressure from DC to get going. So maybe get ahead of it and get working on your plans and implementation sooner than later. Now's a good time. If you have any questions, we have about 15 minutes with this panel to take some questions. If you wanted to, there's some right here. While I review this, I have one question of my own, and we'll learn a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of language access plans and planning tomorrow, but one key component of the plans and planning, and you'll hear about this from the Feds, is that there be a pretty pretty comprehensive data collection process. And, I noticed with Justice McKenna's slide, she, has the top encountered languages in the courts. And so I was wondering how you went about, just what did you do administratively to get this information? And I think that'll be useful to the other agencies here to spawn some ideas on what they can do. Because we really just don't want to spend a lot of limited resources and efforts on producing a bunch of documents, translated documents in a language isn't seen. So if you guys have comments on that, I'd love to hear.
Melody will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's through years of training each and every staff member about the critical importance of actually documenting every single encounter. And I think we've gotten pretty good with it, right, Melody? We're getting better. So we may be missing a few still, but it's through Debbie and Melody's training. All of our staff, every single person in the judiciary is trained on, and they've created forms on how to document it, and they forward it to, they have the process of forwarding it, so to make sure that Debbie and Melody get the information so that we can create our language access plan and our explanation every year. Our plan is on our website. It's very detailed. I think it's a pretty good language access plan. Please take a look at our website. We're very proud of our website and our language access services that are available and all the information there.
Thank you, Justice. Labor, do you have any thoughts or suggestions on data collection?
On data collection.
You speak into the microphone.
Yeah, I think having the Office of Language Access in the same building probably does wonders for data collection. That's been my observation. I was going to say something unrelated, which is I think one good thing that Labor did was we had a little training video that we distributed to all the satellite offices and divisions, and we put it up on our intranet, so people can on their own time, instead of having to go to a formalized training, they can watch this as many times per year as they want, but at least once per year. So that way we make sure that everyone in the department is trained at all times, and I think that helps a lot.
Thank you, Aj. Bridget?
So at DHS, all of the staff that have a language, an LEP encounter are required to report that centrally, and so we do keep the statistics. But as I mentioned, we're also in the midst of a major IT conversion, and we're really trying to incorporate, we will incorporate a data gathering system so that we can do that more, I guess, in a more consistent way. I think the staff is consistent about the actual reporting, but in terms of the management or how different divisions use the data, we really want to make sure that we're not just collecting the statistics, but also applying what we learn from those statistics and that data to provide better services and improve our programs.
Okay, thank you. Well, you mentioned IT, and we're going to hear a lot about technology tomorrow, just as a little preview for tomorrow. But in my view, I think technology should have a critical role in data collection and should hopefully streamline a lot of those efforts. I have a couple questions that are related, so I'll read them both, and maybe you guys can comment on this combo question. This one is addressed to Bridget, but I think it applies to everyone. This is in reference to staff training, particularly for those who have first contact with potential LEP persons. I am interested in knowing if you permit staffers who are multilingual to speak to LEP persons needing assistance in lieu of a certified interpreter for general questions. Parens, these are staffers who speak the language needed by the LEP person. And then the related question is, how much language access is provided through bilingual workers, parens, as opposed to certified interpreters, and parens? Would an increase in bilingual workers make a difference in improving access? And I'll just pause here to say we're going to hear about a bilingual workforce tomorrow, so please come back tomorrow for that. But see what you have to say.
And I'm going to ask AP to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think for general, if there is a moment where the person at the counter actually does speak the language of the person who comes in and needs help, I think that's a good thing in that general information can be provided. There's not a complete lack of connection there. However, I think our staff understands that for more complex issues, to make sure that nothing gets, literally lost in translation, we really do need to call that mainland service. And as they can be on the phone in just minutes, that's clearly the preference, to have a professional interpreter become involved. Is that accurate, AP? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so similarly, our volunteer interpreters help only when no rights or benefits are at stake, and when it's clear that it's not going to be so complicated or legal. Like the Department of Labor actually does a lot of quasi-judicial hearings, so that can get very technical and very subtle very quickly. So we tend to rely on certified translators in those cases.
There are only 11 certified interpreters in the state of Hawaii. They work in Spanish, Laotian, and Mandarin. Our Ilocano interpreter is not available for health reasons. So if you're not calling one of those 11 people, you're not getting a certified interpreter. I don't know who's answering the phone for your phone service. Maybe they're certified, maybe they're not. With regard to the Department of Human Services, Washington State has an interpreter certification program for their department. It's been in existence because of a federal case for a long time. And I forget how many languages they have, but it's quite a few. And I would suggest, if you haven't looked at their program yet, that you consider it very seriously. They have their own work-specific, that is, human services-specific certification program.
Thank you, Alohalani. We are going to hear a lot about the state of Washington's certificate. Oh, and she's smiling and excited about it. We're going to hear about that. We're going to hear about that later, next hour. We're going to hear about it tomorrow.
Can I just say, I just want to thank you for the comment and the input. I actually had lunch today with the representative from Washington, so I really appreciate your input on that, and I'm glad I had an opportunity to talk with her.
Yes, great. And then Justice Mckenna, did you have any comments on that?
In court proceedings, we obviously do not use employees or allow family as a matter of policy. I believe, I'm going to ask Melody, I'm assuming that for over-the-counter at this point, if they really speak the language, we will allow the bilingual staff to help, but otherwise, we'll go to telephonic right away. So that's the way we work it. But in terms of court, no, you have to get the best person possible. And as Alohalani said, we only have 11 certified interpreters.
And I will just interject as a matter of Hawaii's black letter law. The requirement that we provide oral interpretation, the requirement is that the interpreter be competent, timely and competent. It's not that they be certified per se, although in some situations, a certified interpreter, matters of liberty, justice, certainly that would be the case. But if it's, say, someone goes to the library and they want to find out, when is this book coming back, will they need a certified interpreter and one that costs top dollar? Maybe not so. So that's why we have a 4-factor analysis that's a little bit fluid and is designed to address the situation based on a number of factors. One of which is the nature and importance of the service. So that's why it's important for each agency to engage in this analysis, put it in their plan, and have some flexibility, but also really think about what's appropriate. with a recognition of the resources they have at hand. So it is somewhat fluid, but it does not excuse anyone from making those efforts. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. It's not easy, but we just need to understand the contours of the issues and the factors at play.
Of that person's ability to speak the language other than English.
Okay, Aloha Lani, I have to respectfully ask you if you could reduce, just like the others here have reduced their questions to a 3x5 card, and then we can take it in turn, just because I
Well,
want to
Becky,
honor those who...
I don't have a 3x5 card.
Okay, they're on every table.
But my question was that, it's really not a question, it's a statement, which is that when you're using bilingual staffers, they need, let me put it as a statement, you need to know that it's not based on self-report, but instead it is based on their passing a test of their ability to speak the language other than English, or to present some viable alternative credential, like they graduated from a university in that country where that language is spoken. But self-reports is extremely unreliable.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question we have, as a community interpreter, when finding out that LEP parents who are told to take their own interpreter to public school meetings, I know we don't have DOE here represented, but perhaps you have some thoughts, to public school meetings, for example, LEP eligibility, or that bilingual school employee or administrator served as an interpreter, what is the procedure to whistleblow such practices? Interpreter ethics prohibit us from giving advice to the LEP. So if you guys have any comments on the whistleblowing process.
I think it's inappropriate for me to comment because it could become a case.
Why? It's very wise. Aadel, do you have any?
I'd have to think about it.
And Bridget?
Ola.
Yeah, okay. I have some.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly the DOE scenario doesn't apply to us, but if it's about parents coming in with children and, I mean, I guess I'll just say generally that we understand that it's inappropriate for fluent English-speaking children to be interpreting for their parents. So we would definitely call in a professional interpreter for that.
Okay, and so
I'm sorry, one
the
other-
go ahead.
To add to that, for the Department of Human Services, we have a policy that we will not use to minor. So for the Department of Human Services, we have a policy in policy that we will not allow a minor to be an interpreter.
Okay, and I'll just repeat what AP said. Oh, unless you want to say it again yourself.
Yeah, like I said, for the Department of Human Services, our policy, we say that, okay, first, we never allow, I would say not never, we not allow minor to be act as an interpreter or translator except emergency situation, like a life to death situation only. So I would say that that situation will not happen to us, but if it happens, call me.
And I think I did a series of trainings with the Hawaii Public Housing Authority, and we went around to the various islands, and I heard all about their language access plan, and they were very clear when talking to all their staff that we do not use minors. So I think as a matter of policy for a number of the departments, that's the stance they've taken. And if you look at a lot of the federal regulations on this, they say don't use minors. I mean, there's conflict of interest, there's confidentiality, there's all sorts of issues at play. So we wouldn't recommend it. But I do want to make sure everyone here knows the Office of Language Access has a complaint process. Although it's informal work sometimes. Sometimes it's just a matter of whoever's on the front line who's interfacing with that LEP person. They're just not aware of the policy. It just didn't trickle down to them. So it may just take a complaint to get on the phone with the language access coordinator for the agency, to call the school, call the program or whatever and say, hey, you need to provide an interpreter, it's the law. Oh, didn't know, let's fix this. And when we've had complaints, we've had the fixes turn around pretty quickly. So it doesn't necessarily need to be really punitive and really, costly and, lots of slaps on the wrist. It just may be a matter of educating the staff, and then once they understand the policy, they can totally embrace it and say, well, okay, yes, let's do the right thing. So make sure that everyone in your agency knows that we have a complaint process, because frankly, I don't think we get enough complaints. And I think this reflects sort of the sentiment of the panel of the LEP community that we had here a couple hours ago, where they were saying, well, we didn't even know that we had this right. Maybe they come from a country where you don't rock the boat, you don't question the government, and it's different here. We kind of embrace this idea, like, shake it up, question authority. We've got these processes in place that we can do something about it and improve it.